Jessica Martin was a woman who seemed to have it all. At 38 years old, she was the epitome of grace and elegance, with a sharp mind and a keen eye for detail. Born and raised in the affluent suburbs of Chicago, she had grown up surrounded by wealth and privilege. Her father was a successful investment banker, and her mother was a socialite, ensuring that Jessica had been groomed for a life of sophistication from a young age. She attended the best private schools, excelled in her studies, and eventually graduated from a prestigious liberal arts college with a degree in art history. Jessica was known for her impeccable taste, her ability to organize flawless events, and her unwavering commitment to maintaining a perfect image. Her husband, Michael Martin, was equally impressive. At 42, Michael was a partner at a well-known law firm in Cleveland, Ohio, where they had moved shortly after their marriage. Michael had always been driven and ambitious. He came from a modest background. His father was a factory worker, and his mother was a schoolteacher. Michael had worked his way through law school, earning scholarships and accolades along the way. His relentless work ethic and sharp legal mind had propelled him to the top of his field. He specialized in corporate law, and his clients included some of the most influential companies in the state. Jessica and Michael met at a charity gala in Chicago when she was 26, and he was 30. They were immediately drawn to each other. Jessica was captivated by Michael's confidence and intelligence, while Michael was taken by Jessica's beauty and poise. Their courtship was swift. Within a year, they were married in a lavish ceremony that was the talk of their social circles. After the wedding, they moved to Cleveland, where Michael had been offered a partnership at his firm. They bought a beautiful colonial-style house in a quiet, upscale neighborhood, and their lives seemed to be unfolding like a fairy tale. To outsiders, Jessica and Michael were the perfect couple. They hosted elegant dinner parties, attended charity events, and vacationed in exotic locations. Jessica became involved in the local arts scene, volunteering at museums and organizing fundraisers, while Michael's career continued to thrive. They were often featured in society pages, their smiles bright and their lives seemingly flawless. But beneath the surface, the cracks in their marriage were beginning to show. Despite their outward appearances, Jessica and Michael's marriage was far from perfect. Over the years, the pressures of maintaining their image had taken a toll on both of them. Michael's career had consumed him, and he spent long hours at the office, often traveling for work and leaving Jessica alone for days at a time. He was dedicated to his clients, and his drive to succeed left little room for anything else. Jessica, meanwhile, had grown increasingly isolated. She filled her days with social obligations and charitable work, but deep down she felt unfulfilled. Jessica's dissatisfaction had been growing for years. She had given up her own career ambitions to support Michael's, and while she had initially enjoyed the social life that came with being a lawyer's wife, it had started to feel hollow. The events she planned, the parties she attended, the people she associated with, they all felt like pieces of a carefully curated image rather than genuine experiences. Jessica longed for something more, but she didn't know what that was. She had become adept at hiding her feelings, presenting a perfect exterior even as she felt herself unraveling inside. Michael, too, was struggling, though he was less aware of it. He had always been focused on his career, believing that success would bring happiness. But as he climbed higher, he found himself feeling more and more disconnected from his own life. His marriage to Jessica, once a source of joy, had become just another item on his list of achievements, something to be maintained, but not necessarily cherished. Michael's long hours and frequent absences created a growing distance between him and Jessica, one that neither of them knew how to bridge. It was during one of Michael's business trips that everything began to change. He had been working on a particularly challenging case that required him to spend several weeks in New York. The case was high stakes, involving a multi-billion-dollar merger between two major corporations. Michael had thrown himself into the work, determined to secure a victory for his client. The pressure was intense, and the hours were grueling, but Michael thrived in such environments. He was in his element, navigating complex legal issues and negotiating deals that could make or break careers. During this time, Jessica was left to manage the household and their social obligations on her own. She had always been self-sufficient, but the loneliness began to weigh on her more heavily than before. She found herself thinking about her life, her marriage, and the choices she had made. There was a growing sense of dissatisfaction, a feeling that she had lost herself somewhere along the way. It was in the midst of this emotional turmoil that Jessica met Ryan. Ryan Miller was a 40-year-old man from Jessica's past, someone she had known briefly in her early 20s. He had been a friend of a friend, a charming and rebellious figure who had always seemed to live life on the edge. Ryan had come from a rough background, growing up in a poor neighborhood in Chicago. He had a history of getting into trouble, minor run-ins with the law, questionable business ventures, and a reputation as a ladies' man. Despite his past, there was something about Ryan that had always intrigued Jessica. He was the complete opposite of Michael, and perhaps that was part of the appeal. Jessica hadn't seen Ryan in years, but they ran into each other by chance one evening at a charity event in Cleveland. Ryan had recently moved to the city, trying to start fresh after a series of failed ventures in Chicago. When Jessica saw him, it was like a spark had been reignited. They caught up over drinks, reminiscing about old times and laughing about the past. Ryan was as charming as ever, and Jessica found herself drawn to him in a way she hadn't felt in years. What began as innocent catching up quickly turned into something more. Jessica started meeting Ryan regularly, under the guise of casual friendship. They would have coffee, go for walks, or meet for drinks after her social engagements. Ryan was attentive and flirtatious, reminding Jessica of a time when she had felt alive and free. He listened to her frustrations about her marriage, sympathizing with her in a way that Michael never did. Jessica found herself opening up to Ryan, sharing things she hadn't even admitted to herself. Ryan, for his part, was captivated by Jessica. He had always admired her from afar when they were younger, but she had been out of his league. Now seeing her again, he was struck by how beautiful and sophisticated she had become. But he also saw the cracks in her facade, the vulnerability beneath the surface. Ryan was no stranger to manipulation, and he quickly realized that Jessica was right for the taking. He played his part perfectly, being the supportive friend while subtly encouraging her dissatisfaction with Michael. As their relationship deepened, Jessica began to see Ryan as a solution to her problems rather than a complication. He represented the excitement and freedom she had been missing in her life. With Michael away in New York, Jessica felt emboldened to explore this new connection. What started as a harmless flirtation quickly spiraled into a full-blown affair. Jessica knew it was wrong, but she justified it to herself by focusing on how neglected and unappreciated she felt in her marriage. Ryan became her escape, a way to reclaim the passion and spontaneity that had long been absent from her life. As the affair intensified, Jessica found herself more and more disillusioned with her marriage. Michael returned from New York, triumphant after winning the case, but Jessica could hardly muster any enthusiasm for his success. The distance between them had grown too wide. Michael, oblivious to the changes in his wife, continued with his usual routine, unaware that Jessica was slipping further away from him. It was during this time that Jessica discovered Michael's affair. She stumbled upon it by accident. An email left open on his laptop, a message from a woman named Emily, who worked at his firm. The email was explicit, leaving no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Jessica felt a cold fury wash over her as she read the words. Michael, who had always prided himself on his integrity, had been lying to her for who knows how long. All the loneliness, the neglect, the frustration, it all made sense now. Michael had been cheating on her, betraying the vows they had made to each other. But rather than confront him, Jessica decided to keep this discovery to herself. She didn't want a confrontation, didn't want to give Michael the satisfaction of knowing he had hurt her. Instead, she turned to Ryan, confiding in him about what she had found. Ryan, always quick to exploit an opportunity, suggested that they take things to the next level. He proposed a plan, one that would not only free Jessica from her unhappy marriage, but also exact revenge on Michael for his betrayal. At first, Jessica was hesitant. The plan Ryan proposed was extreme, dangerous even, but the more she thought about it, the more it appealed to her. Why should Michael get away with what he had done? Why should he be allowed to ruin her life and walk away unscathed? Jessica's anger and resentment began to cloud her judgment, and she found herself agreeing to Ryan's plan. It was reckless, but it felt empowering, like taking control of her life for the first time in years. Ryan's plan was simple yet diabolical. They would eliminate Michael's lover, framing Michael for the crime. Jessica would provide a perfect alibi, ensuring that she was seen in public, far from the scene of the crime. The evidence would be carefully planted, pointing directly to Michael. It would be the ultimate revenge, destroying his life just as he had destroyed hers. As the days turned into weeks, the tension between Jessica and Michael grew more palpable. On the surface, they continued to play their roles as the perfect couple, but beneath the facade, their marriage was rapidly deteriorating. Jessica found it increasingly difficult to maintain the pretense of a loving wife, especially after discovering Michael's affair with Emily. Each time she looked at him, she felt a surge of anger and betrayal, but she buried those feelings deep, channeling them into the plan she and Ryan were orchestrating. Michael, for his part, was oblivious to the storm brewing within his own home. He was consumed with his work and his secret relationship with Emily, unaware that Jessica had discovered his betrayal. To him, Jessica's cool demeanor and distant behavior were simply the result of the stresses of her social obligations, not a sign of the brewing catastrophe. He continued to see Emily in secret, believing that he had everything under control. However, Michael's frequent absences only fueled Jessica's determination to carry out her plan. Each night he spent with Emily was another nail in his coffin, as far as Jessica was concerned. Jessica's relationship with Ryan deepened during this time, becoming more than just a calculated alliance. What had started as an affair of convenience evolved into something more intense, more dangerous. Jessica found herself drawn to Ryan in ways she hadn't anticipated. He represented everything Michael wasn't: spontaneous, passionate, and willing to take risks. Their secret meetings became the highlight of her day, a chance to escape the confines of her stifling marriage and embrace a darker, more thrilling world. Ryan, however, was not content to simply be Jessica's lover. He saw an opportunity to manipulate the situation to his advantage. He had always been a man driven by ambition, even if that ambition had led him down some questionable paths. Now he saw Jessica's vulnerability as a chance to elevate himself, to gain power and wealth that had always eluded him. Ryan knew how to play on Jessica's emotions, feeding her resentment and encouraging her to push forward with their plan. He assured her that they were doing the right thing, that Michael deserved what was coming to him, and that together, they could have everything they wanted. But as their plan took shape, so did the cracks in their partnership. Jessica began to sense that Ryan's motivations weren't entirely aligned with hers. He was increasingly secretive, disappearing for hours at a time without explanation. When Jessica confronted him about it, Ryan brushed off her concerns, claiming he was simply taking care of details for the plan. But Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Ryan's charm and confidence, which had initially drawn her in, now made her uneasy. She began to wonder if she could truly trust him, or if she was just another pawn in his game. The secret meetings between Jessica and Ryan became more frequent and more dangerous as they finalized the details of their plan. They met in secluded locations, careful to avoid being seen together. Sometimes it was a quiet corner of a downtown bar where no one knew them, other times it was a remote park on the outskirts of the city. These clandestine encounters were filled with hushed conversations and stolen glances, a mixture of excitement and tension hanging over them like a storm cloud ready to burst. As the plan began to take shape, Jessica's paranoia started to grow. She was constantly on edge, worried that someone might discover their plot before it could be executed. Every phone call, every knock on the door made her heart race, fearing that it could be the police or someone else who had figured out what they were up to. She started to imagine that people were watching her, scrutinizing her every move. Even innocent interactions with neighbors or friends took on a sinister tone in her mind, as if they were all part of some conspiracy to uncover her secrets. Ryan, noticing Jessica's growing anxiety, tried to reassure her. He reminded her that they had been careful, that no one suspected a thing, and that the plan was foolproof. But Jessica wasn't so sure. She had always been meticulous, but now every detail seemed like a potential flaw, every step a chance to be caught. The once exhilarating thrill of their affair and their plot was now overshadowed by a constant undercurrent of fear. Their relationship began to strain under the weight of these fears. Jessica became more demanding, insisting on constant updates and reassurance from Ryan. She started to question his every move, wanting to know where he had been and who he had spoken to. Ryan, who had always prided himself on his independence and control, grew frustrated with Jessica's increasing neediness. He didn't like feeling boxed in, and her constant questioning began to irritate him. One evening, during one of their secret meetings in a dimly lit bar, Jessica confronted Ryan about his recent absences. Her voice was low, but there was an edge to it that hadn't been there before. "Where have you been, Ryan? You've been disappearing for hours, and you're not telling me anything. Are you seeing someone else?" The accusation hung in the air between them, thick with tension. Ryan's eyes narrowed, and he leaned in closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're being paranoid, Jessica. I've been out making sure everything is in place for the plan. You need to trust me." But his words did little to calm her. Jessica could see the flicker of annoyance in his eyes, and it only heightened her suspicions. "I don't think you're telling me the whole truth," Jessica replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I need to know that I can trust you, Ryan. We're in this together, but if you're hiding something from me, I need to know now." Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Jessica, you're letting your fear get the best of you. We've come this far, we can't start doubting each other now. If you don't trust me, this whole thing will fall apart." He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I'm doing this for us, for you. You have to believe that. Jessica looked down at their intertwined hands, her mind racing. She wanted to believe him, to trust that they were on the same side. But the doubt gnawed at her, a persistent whisper in the back of her mind that wouldn't go away. She nodded slowly, forcing a smile. The seed of mistrust had been planted, and it would continue to grow. The night was eerily quiet as a heavy fog settled over the Cleveland suburb where Jessica and Michael Martin lived. The plan that Jessica and Ryan had meticulously crafted was set to unfold that evening. Emily Turner, Michael's 29-year-old colleague and lover, was working late at the law firm, unaware of the danger that awaited her. Jessica had ensured that all the pieces were in place, but fate had other plans. Earlier that day, Jessica received an unexpected call from Emily. To Jessica's surprise, Emily wanted to meet her in person. Curiosity and a sense of unease gnawed at Jessica as she agreed to meet at a small, secluded cafe downtown. When they met, Emily appeared anxious, her usual confident demeanor replaced by visible distress. "Jessica, I know this is awkward, but I needed to talk to you," Emily began, her voice trembling slightly. Jessica maintained a composed exterior, though her heart raced. "What is this about, Emily?" "I've been seeing Michael," Emily confessed, eyes filled with remorse. "But it's over now. I ended it. I realized it was a mistake, and I wanted to apologize to you directly." Jessica's mind swirled with conflicting emotions, anger, relief, and an unexpected pang of sympathy. This revelation threatened to derail everything she and Ryan had planned. If Emily had ended the affair, was there still a reason to proceed? Trying to mask her inner turmoil, Jessica replied, "I appreciate your honesty, Emily. It's painful to hear, but I respect that you came to me." Emily reached across the table, placing a tentative hand over Jessica's. "I truly am sorry. I hope someday you can forgive both of us." Jessica forced a tight smile and nodded, but as she left the cafe, her mind was already racing. She needed to contact Ryan immediately and discuss this new development. Later that evening, Jessica met Ryan at their usual spot, a deserted parking lot near the outskirts of the city. She explained the conversation with Emily, suggesting that perhaps they should call off the plan. "Are you kidding me?" Ryan snapped, his frustration evident. "We've come too far to back out now. Besides, do you really believe she ended it? She was probably trying to cover her tracks." Jessica hesitated, doubt creeping into her mind. But what if she's telling the truth? Maybe this is a chance to move on without all this. Ryan's eyes flashed with anger. "After everything we've done, all the risks I'd taken, no, Jessica, this ends tonight as planned." Jessica sensed something different in Ryan, an intensity that bordered on desperation. "Why are you so adamant about this? It's almost like you have more at stake than I do." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Don't forget, I'm the one putting myself on the line here. You're the one who wanted revenge, and I'm making it happen." An uneasy silence fell between them before Jessica finally conceded. "Fine, let's get it over with." Ryan nodded, his expression softening slightly. "Good, you just stick to the plan. Be seen somewhere public, make sure your alibi is solid. I'll handle the rest." As Jessica drove away to attend a charity gala, her alibi for the evening, a sense of dread settled over her. Something felt off, but it was too late to turn back now. At the law firm's office, Emily was finishing up some paperwork, eager to put the day's events behind her. The building was nearly empty, the halls quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights. As she gathered her things to leave, the elevator doors opened, and Ryan stepped out, dressed in a maintenance worker's uniform, a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. "Can I help you?" Emily asked, startled by his sudden appearance. Ryan offered a disarming smile. "Sorry to bother you, ma'am. We've had reports of a leak on this floor. Mind if I check around?" Emily relaxed slightly. "Sure, but I haven't noticed anything." "Won't take long," Ryan assured her, casually glancing around the office. As Emily turned back to her desk, Ryan moved swiftly, producing a syringe filled with a potent sedative. He approached silently, intending to incapacitate her quickly and stage the scene to implicate Michael. However, at the last moment, Emily caught his reflection in the computer screen and spun around, eyes wide with fear. "What are you doing?" she screamed, trying to back away. Ryan lunged, grabbing her arm and attempting to inject the sedative, but Emily fought back fiercely, knocking the syringe out of his hand. The two struggled, knocking over furniture and scattering papers across the room. Emily managed to scratch Ryan's face, drawing blood, and screamed for help, her voice echoing through the empty halls. Panicking, Ryan grabbed a heavy paperweight from the desk and, in a fit of rage, struck Emily across the head. She collapsed to the ground, motionless. Breathing heavily, Ryan stared down at her, the gravity of what he'd done slowly sinking in. This wasn't supposed to happen, he muttered to himself, his hands shaking. He checked for a pulse but found none. The plan had been to make it look like a premeditated murder by Michael, with carefully planted evidence and no signs of struggle. Now the scene was chaotic, and Ryan's own DNA and fingerprints were everywhere. Thinking quickly, he began to wipe down surfaces, but it was a futile effort. Time was running out, and he needed to get out before someone arrived. In his haste, he planted Michael's cufflink, which Jessica had procured earlier, near Emily's body, hoping it would still tie Michael to the scene. Ryan fled the building through a back exit, disappearing into the night as sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have heard the commotion and called the police. The next morning, news of Emily Turner's murder spread rapidly. Jessica heard the report on the morning news, her blood running cold as the anchor described the brutal scene. Authorities are investigating the death as a homicide, with signs of a violent struggle. No suspects have been named at this time, the reporter stated. Jessica's phone rang. It was Michael. His voice was strained, filled with shock and fear. "Did you hear about Emily? She's dead, Jess. Someone killed her." Jessica feigned surprise, her heart pounding in her chest. "Oh my God, that's terrible." "Do they know what happened?" "No, not yet. The police want to talk to everyone at the firm." I can't believe this." As the day progressed, detectives began their investigation, interviewing coworkers and collecting evidence. The planted cufflink quickly drew their attention to Michael. Combined with reports from other employees about Michael and Emily's close relationship, suspicion mounted. Detective Lisa Harris, a seasoned investigator with keen instincts, led the case. She questioned Michael extensively, noting his nervous demeanor and evasive answers regarding his relationship with Emily. "Mr. Martin, were you having an affair with Ms. Turner?" Detective Harris asked pointedly. Michael hesitated before admitting, "Yes, but it was over. We ended things a few days ago. Where were you last night between 8 and 10 p.m.? "At home with my wife," Michael replied, his voice wavering slightly. Detective Harris took note and scheduled a time to speak with Jessica to corroborate his alibi. When Detective Harris visited the Martin residence, Jessica was prepared. She recounted that Michael had been home all evening, detailing a quiet night spent together. However, Harris sensed something was off. The story seemed rehearsed, too precise. Additionally, forensic evidence from the crime scene complicated matters. While Michael's cufflink was found near the body, other evidence didn't align neatly. A partial fingerprint not matching Michael's was recovered, as well as traces of blood under Emily's fingernails that didn't belong to him. Detective Harris pursued these leads diligently, widening the investigation. Surveillance footage from nearby buildings was reviewed, revealing a blurry image of a man leaving the scene around the time of the murder, not matching Michael's description. As pressure mounted, Ryan began to unravel. Guilt and fear consumed him, and he started making mistakes. He used his credit card near the crime scene shortly after the murder, and surveillance cameras captured clear images of him in the area. Detective Harris connected the dots, identifying Ryan Miller as a person of interest. Upon digging into his background, she discovered his connection to Jessica. They had attended the same college and had been seen together recently. Confronted with this new information, Harris returned to question Jessica. This time, Jessica struggled to maintain her composure under the detective's probing questions. "Mrs. Martin, how well do you know Ryan Miller?" Harris asked, her gaze steady. Jessica swallowed hard. "He's an old friend. We ran into each other a few months ago." "Were you aware that Mr. Miller was in the vicinity of the crime scene on the night of Emily Turner's murder?" Jessica's eyes widened, panic creeping into her voice. "No, I had no idea." Harris leaned in, her tone insistent. "Are you sure about that? Witnesses have reported seeing you and Mr. Miller together on multiple occasions. Is there something you're not telling me?" The walls were closing in, and Jessica knew it. Later that night, she met with Ryan, urging him to leave town before the police could find him. "It's over, Ryan. They know about you. You need to disappear," she pleaded. Ryan, however, was past the point of rational decisions. Paranoid and desperate, he accused Jessica of setting him up. "This is all your fault. You wanted this, and now you're trying to pin it all on me." Their argument escalated, and in a moment of blind rage, Ryan lunged at Jessica. She fought back, grabbing a nearby lamp and striking him across the head. Ryan stumbled, falling to the ground unconscious. Shaking and terrified, Jessica called 911, reporting an assault. When the police arrived, they arrested Ryan, who regained consciousness and was too disoriented to resist. The subsequent investigation pieced together the twisted plot between Jessica and Ryan. Faced with overwhelming evidence and reduced options, Ryan eventually confessed, detailing the entire plan and implicating Jessica as the mastermind. Jessica was arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder and accessory to murder. Michael, devastated by the revelations, attended every day of the trial, his face etched with pain and disbelief. During the trial, the prosecution presented a compelling case, showcasing text messages, meeting records, and Ryan's testimony against Jessica. The defense tried to paint Jessica as a victim manipulated by Ryan, but the jury saw through the facade. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the verdict was delivered. Ryan was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for first-degree murder. Jessica received a 25-year sentence for her role in the conspiracy and attempted cover-up. As she was led away in handcuffs, Jessica caught Michael's eye one last time. His expression was a mix of sorrow and contempt. The life they had built together, the image of perfection they had maintained, was shattered beyond repair. Months later, Michael stood alone in the backyard of what was once their shared home, reflecting on the chaos that had engulfed his life. He had lost his mistress to a violent death, his wife to prison, and his own reputation lay in tatters due to the scandal. Determined to rebuild, Michael resigned from his position at the law firm and moved back to his hometown, seeking solace and a fresh start. He volunteered at local community centers, using his legal expertise to help those in need, hoping to find redemption through service. In prison, Jessica struggled to come to terms with her new reality. The woman who had once orchestrated elegant galas now spent her days in confinement, reflecting on the choices that led her there. She attended counseling sessions and participated in rehabilitation programs, clinging to the hope of eventual freedom and a chance to start anew. Ryan remained incarcerated, his life defined by the impulsive, violent choices he had made. His dreams of wealth and power had crumbled, leaving him to face the consequences of his actions alone. The tragedy served as a stark reminder of how deceit, betrayal, and the desire for revenge could unravel even the most seemingly perfect lives. In the end, no one emerged unscathed, each paying a heady price for their sins.